Thanks for staying with us here on TVC Breakfast. On the 15th of January, 1966, a group of young, idealistic, United Kingdom-trained army majors overthrew Nigeria's democratic government in a violent military coup. Although most of Nigeria's current population of about 170 million were not born when the country's first coup was staged 50 years ago, but its legacy lingers on. Africa's bloodiest coup did not stop at that stage, despite the shooting of 42 officers and over 130 other ranks. The children of these officers who died during the coup still relive the memories of that night. There is more in this report.
A major in the army led some of his colleagues to overthrow the democratic government in place at that time, headed by Nnamdi Azikiwe as the president and Tafawa Balewa as the prime minister. The president was away in the Caribbean on vacation. Thus, the prime minister and other ministers were inadvertently the target of the coup. The violent coup began as a mere 9-time training exercise for junior officers known as Exercise Damisa, and it was held close to the premises of Ahmadu Bello, the then premier of the northern region. But it turned out to be one of Nigeria's bloodiest coups, as many government officials and soldiers were killed. On that Saturday, the coup plotters had spread themselves across their target areas, Kaduna, Lagos, and Ibadan, where they murdered the likes of Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Sir Ahmadu Bello, Brigadier General Samuel Ademulegun, who was the then commander of the 2nd Brigade, Colonel Ralph Shudendi, Chief Samuel Akintola, and Festus Okotiebo, among others. Colonel Victor Banjo and others were abducted days after the coup and have not been seen till date. History records all those who were murdered that night as heroes, and we shall never be led to forget or undermine the supreme sacrifice that they made for our beloved nation. Interestingly, some children of these fallen officers witnessed the gruesome killing by the mutinous soldiers, and 58 years after the 1966 coup, the families of these heroes are still grieving their deaths.
Well, joining us in the studio is daughter of late Brigadier Samuel Adesujo Ademulegun and a school proprietor, Sholakpe Ademulegun Agbi. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And also we have joining us via Zoom from Ibadan, Oyo State, daughter of late Colonel Victor Banjo and Provost, University of Ibadan College of Medicine, Professor Olayinka Omigbodun. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Right. But this time around, I would like to start from the studio with Madam Ademulegun. I would like to address you, with the name of your father, because I know that you have a very fondest memory of your late dad. Can you describe the events of, the fateful night, talking about January the 15th, 1966, and how these events actually shaped your life?
Well, I was 6 years old. I had just had chicken pox, so I had calamine lotion all over my face. So I was sleeping in the bedroom with them on the same bed with my mom and dad. My mom was pregnant, about 8 months pregnant. These soldiers came in. I woke up. They were having conversations with my dad, which I really can't fathom now after so many years. I know that I recognized Major Nwatwegu because he and Nzegu and a few of them were regular visitors to the house. I recall saying, "Uncle, what are you doing in our house?" But of course, the other soldiers, with all the guns pointed, kept me quiet. After a while, I saw my mother get up and stand in front of my dad, probably thinking, "Oh, I'm a woman, I'm pregnant." They would look at that. I don't know what went through her head. And after a few minutes, at some point, they marched my father out of the bedroom and brought him back in. History has it that they asked him for the keys to the armory. I don't know. I don't know what conversation happened when they marched him up. And they brought him back in. And my father tried to open his drawer. I remember that because I had moved to the edge of the bed where the drawer was. History has it that probably he wanted to pick his service rifle, pistol, whatever it's called. And next thing, they started raining the bullets. Blood everywhere. Blood everywhere. I mean, my mom was pregnant, so, I mean, it's more like 3 people were killed. Then a few of them looting, wearing his shoes, trying his wristwatch on and all that. I had an older brother, Bankole. He died a little over a year ago. He was, what, 6 plus 7, 13? He was in the other room. He had heard the gunshots. He peeked, and then he went back, made signs at me, and then went back. So as soon as they finished and they started going away, they left. My brother came in and took my younger brother and I through the night to the boys' quarters. You know, to me, it was like, okay, blood and all, but they're sleeping. You know, maybe they'll wake up, you know. And
the sound of the gun didn't scare you?
It did, which was why I, you know, cowered on the bed. But I watched everything with my eyes open. So the next morning, we were picked up. Their bodies were picked up from the house. We were taken to Queen Amina Orphanage in Kaduna. But I still felt, oh, okay, they're going to wake up and come for me. I shouldn't be here. At some point, when I kept disturbing the Catholic nuns who were running the orphanage, they had a burial ground within the orphanage grounds. One of them took me to the burial ground, showed me tombs and, you know, of people, and told me that they had gone to be with Jesus. They were not going to come back. Okay, they're going to be with Jesus. Okay, they'll still come back. I mean, after a while, you visit some. Yeah, you know, that's what I thought. Life after that was terrible.
Wow.
Yeah.
We'll try to get into, you know, that more experience. But I'd like to come to our guest on studio, Professor Omigbodun on studio, for your opening salvo, you know, in this very crucial conversation. How do you think your dad's actions were motivated by, according to what people say, a desire to combat corruption and tribalism, and what impact do you think this had on your family?
Well, you mean my dad's, I'm still trying to understand the question that you're asking.
Right. Yeah,
Yes.
because people describe your dad as a key figure in the 1966 coup. So those who talk about him, they said, you know, he had, you know, keen actions, you know, which were motivated by desire to combat corruption and tribalism.
Let me just mention. Actually, anytime I listen to Sister Sholape's story, I actually get very emotional about it. My father, late Lieutenant Colonel Victor Banjo, was not involved in the January 1966 coup. And so up to today, we don't know why he was arrested. He had no knowledge about it. And several of the key players in that coup who lived to speak later on wrote it clearly that he was not involved in the January 1966 coup. He had no knowledge about it. He was just as surprised about it as others. He was not involved in the January 66 coup. So, and if you read his letters, I have because he was in prison for 18 months. And I have a book here, Gift of Sequins, Letters to My Wife. These were my father's prison letters to my mom when he was in prison in Ikotikpene and later on in Enugu. It was clearly stated he knew nothing about the coup, and he didn't even know why he was arrested. Because on the 17th of January, which was 2 days after the coup, he went to work. And he went to support then General Ironsi to see how they could kind of bring some kind of peace after the terrible bloodshed. And he was arrested from outside General Ironsi's office. And it's documented in a letter that he wrote to my mom. And a letter he wrote to General, asking for his release from prison because he could not understand why he was arrested. So he was not at all involved in the January 1966 coup. Please.
That's
Thank you.
Thanks so much for that clarification. And that's the reason why you're here.
All right, I saw you nodding, so you seem to agree with her on what she said. So is that from a standpoint of what you saw that night, or our father was a family friend of yours?
Yes, he was. And in his book, I have a copy of that book, he mentioned my father a lot of times. My friend, Brigadier Sam. My friend, Brigadier Sam. On, I don't remember the page, I have a copy of the book. He said in one of his letters to his wife, as soon as I get out, if I get out, I would like to look for Brigadier Sam's 2 children, the last 2 of us, and see how I can help to make their lives more comfortable since they have lost both parents. Yeah.
Interesting stuff. Let me come back to you, Professor Olayinka Omigbodun. You know, talking about what you try to help us understand now, especially with the controversial history, you know, surrounding your father, which you make clarifications to, with some viewing him as a hero still, despite all of these, you know, controversies. How do you respond to these differing perspectives, and what exactly is the truth about your father and what he stood for when he was alive?
Well, one of the things I've always said over the years is that I'm very proud of my dad, extremely proud. In fact, when I was in medical school, I did not wear a name tag of Yinka Banjo. I wore a name tag, Yinka Victor Banjo. And if you look at my email profile or whatever, I really, somebody I'm very proud of. Even though I was very, very young when he was eventually, when we got news that he was executed somewhere in Enugu, you know. So in sometime, I think September 1967, we at that time had left the country and we were in Sierra Leone. My mother was Sierra Leonean. But if you look at his words to his wife, right through, there were times, I mean, for example, I'm going to read, because I held this book. He's in his letter, in his own handwriting, and I have copies of all these letters, 14th November 1966. He says, I still stand by unadulterated justice, even to my enemies. I still stand by truth, honor, loyalty, integrity, rulership by law and by consent. Nothing that has happened or ever will happen will ever make me condone or fail to condemn unequivocally the exercise of arbitrary vengeance. Vengeance belongs to God alone. So some of the things about my dad were that, number one, he believed in justice, he believed in integrity, he believed in one Nigeria. And he was totally against any attempt to separate the country. But at the same time, he said it several times in his letters that he disagreed very much with the massacre, even of the Igbos. He stood, yes, he said he disagreed. And I know, like Sister Sholakwe said, he was very concerned about them. Because I'm going to read from his words here. You know, he was quoted. He said that was his letter to my mom on the 3rd of February, 1967. He said, I wonder what is happening to the children of my late friend, Brigadier Sam. I've always hoped that when I come out, then he was in prison, I will find them and do my best to make sure that they do not suffer too much from the loss of both parents. But I'm still stuck here. I hope God looks after them because human beings are so unreliable. Those were his words. So he really, and he's one person that believed that if Nigeria was put on the right path, that we had a lot of potential. And, you know, I would, just going back to your question, because I have a letter that he wrote to Major General Aguiyi Ironsi. I'll just read one very quickly. On the 1st of June, 1966, where he said, I'm just going to quote, he said to him, on the morning of Monday, 17 January 1966, I was arrested by Lieutenant Colonel G.T. Kurubu and Major P.A. Anwia in the anteroom of the IGP's office for no ostensible reason while I was waiting to see you. that during the period of my close arrest, I had been shamefully mishandled by soldiers. Yes.
All right, Professor, we'll be back to continue that conversation with you. Back to you in the studio. So let's talk about, you know, how much honor have been given to your family following this. In recent times, or even from the beginning, we have involved ourselves as a nation in remembering our heroes. And you mentioned in your book that, you know, your parents were taken out that night. Until today, you do not know where, you know, they were buried. And so that's why we're having this conversation to know that while we are trying to honor our heroes, we do not have a particular site. And you mentioned that that exact site right now is an expressway.
Yeah, so we heard years later. Don't forget that we were young. Oh, I had older brothers from other mothers, but the first was in Germany at the time. The second was the one who took us out. He was just 13. So let's say everyone was young. So we don't know where. My mom was Muslim. So, I mean, you know how that is. A Christian is buried in a different way, Muslims. But so we don't know how or where. So years later, I think one of my brothers tried to find out. And we were told, oh, somewhere in Kaduna, but it's no longer a burial ground. A flyover now goes over the place. So we really couldn't give them the honors we would have wanted to do as children when we grew up. Honors, I understand. Well, the street was named after my father in Abuja.
Okay.
I went there for the first time a couple of weeks ago. Samuel Adebulagu Avenue, somewhere in the local business district. Ondo State named the longest street in Ondo town, where we come from after my father. A cenotaph was built in his honor. The Nigerian Army sent us through Army Children's School, through secondary school until first degree, every one of us. Otherwise, that was it.
Well, we are actually racing to a close, and I would quickly like to throw this question to Professor Olayinka Omibodun. You know, very quickly, as a professor of psychiatry, how has your father's experience influenced your work in mental health, particularly in areas like trauma and resilience, vis-a-vis, you know, the current situation we are going through in this country, where things, you know, seem to be very difficult? What would be your advice to everyone watching us right now, based on your own experience and how you became very resilient to becoming what you've become today?
Okay, I'll quickly, first of all, I want to take the opportunity very quickly to also answer the question that Mr. Sholakwe answered. And that is, as of today, we don't have any information on my daddy's whereabouts. We don't have a birth certificate, a death certificate. We don't know where he was buried. We have nothing. My father died, I mean, we're told, we read it in the news, that he was killed, executed on the orders of his friend, Ojukwu, sometime in September of 1967. But that's all. The army has not communicated. We don't have nothing. So that's, you know, but one of the things that I'm really grateful for, I must acknowledge my mother. My mother, and that's why I feel, you know, I always, you know, feel so touched by Sister Sholakwe's story, because she lost both parents. And as a child and adolescent psychiatrist, I know the impact. So I think having a mother, even though my mother was greatly traumatized, and I know for many years my mother had what we call post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's a disorder that develops when you are exposed to severe traumatic events, and which I don't have time to go into. And she also suffered depression. Because when she died, I read a lot of her letters. And anyway, a lot of her letters stating that she was depressed for many years. And then, of course, she had never had closure about the death of her husband. And, of course, nobody paid our fee. I mean, we had relatives and other people, and mom, we struggled through school. Thank God. So I believe that has helped me to realize the trauma. And what I've spent, I'm actually a child and adolescent psychiatrist. And I work with children in every sphere of my life. You know, God has been so faithful. I've actually at some point been the president of the International Association for Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and the first African. So I've used my life to reach out to children in the remand home, children in orphanages, children in difficult situations, because I know that if you don't have a good foundation as a child, it's very difficult to be a stable adult.
Absolutely.
And I know that many children are being traumatized right now.
That's right.
And that's one of the problems we have in our nation. We have out-of-school street children, children who are being brutalized, and children whose minds, and you know, when you brutalize a child,
Professor,
when a child sees something like what Sister Sholakwe sees, it affects her brain. Her brain configuration changes.
Professor, I'm afraid we're out of time, Professor. You know, there's a lot you want to tell us. Definitely because of your wealth of knowledge and experience, as well as our guest in the studio, who has also been talking to us about this. But then, I promise you, we'll definitely find more time to talk about this, you know, some other time, because we're actually out of time now. And I know that there has to be a closure. And I tell you that, you know, the Nigerian government, as well as the Nigerian army, definitely also, you know, watching us, and would definitely also do something regarding this. Thank you very kindly. The daughter of late Brigadier Samuel Adesujo Ademulegun and school proprietor Sholakwe Ademulegun Agbi. Thank you so much for bringing us that, taking us through that.
Thank you very much.
As well as via Zoom has been from Ibadan, daughter of late Colonel Victor Banjo and a provost, University of Ibadan College of Medicine, Professor Lainka. Thank you so much for your keenness of insight into this very important history. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Right.